Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 Beautification Advisory Commission Award Ceremony. This night is to celebrate all the work that you do on your homes and keeping Oak Park beautiful. So first thing we should do here is give yourselves a round of applause. As you look around town in Oak Park, we've been doing a lot of things to try to beautify and upkeep our city on our end too. And I want to point some of those things out. Under the leadership of City Manager Eric Tungate, we've been attacking a lot of grant applications and really striving to bring the quality of what we own in the city property up to the standards that you all keep in your homes. So some of the things that I want to point out, we've been doing the sunflower gardens for a while now. This year we struggled a little bit with the weather early on, and a lot of them we've had to replant several times. But I still think it's a key piece of what we're doing here is trying to plant these gardens throughout the city so that you know when you see them, you're in Oak Park and you've kind of seen a piece of what we're trying to do here in Oak Park. One of the projects that I really want to point out and hope all of you have a chance to drive by and check out is the 9 Mile Road project. So 9 Mile Road between Coolidge and as you go east into Ferndale, we're doing a big, what's called the road diet, but it includes a lot of other features too. There's bioswales where there's plantings that hold the rainwater so that we can hopefully prevent any type of future flooding in our sewer system. And there's also islands with landscaping in them. So as you drive through, you'll see a lot of shrubbery and a lot of native grasses and things like that that are will take on a lot of that water, and they're drought tolerant as well, so that they'll still grow even though they're in a harsh environment like a streetscape. There's also several landscaped areas off to the side, new trees, new landscape beds. There's a lot of neat features in this area. We've also included 2 pocket parks that you'll notice, both at Sherman and Seneca. We've closed the road there, and we're putting a park in. So those parks are included. There's a play structure at Seneca. It's called the DNA Tower, very colorful, kind of looks like a DNA structure, 24 feet tall, I think it is. But it adds a lot of color and dimension to this park. You'll see some neat signage, some kind of artsy types of things. In Sherman Park, it's going to be a little more active, where we're going to have some concrete cornhole games. We're going to have like a concrete pattern chess board. And just a lot of decorative features. We're really trying to spruce this area up as one of our main corridors in Oak Park. So I hope you get a chance to ride by. It's still in progress right now, but you can really see it already coming to life, and it is a drastic change for that area. So please check that out. We're real proud of where that's going. We've also included, I may add, as a bunch of planters through that region. So a lot of areas that were a sea of concrete and sidewalk, we put planters in to kind of soften that up. And we actually just planted most of those today, and we'll plant the rest tomorrow. So you'll see a variety of mums in there now and things like that for the season. This year, I don't know if you've noticed the signs, but we'll give out a sign to each of you to put in your yard. The Beautification Commission is prided ourselves in the years of really dressing up those signs and making them unique and attractive so that you're proud to put them in your yard. With that, I do want to introduce the chairperson of the Beautification Commission. She's going to do the introductions this evening and introduce the speaker. So Lonnie Tabb-Upshaw. I want to personally thank you and the commission for all the work that you do.
Good evening. I'm Lonnie Tabb-Upshaw. I'm your chairperson for the City of Oak Park Beautification Commission. And before I introduce the guest speaker, I'd like to introduce to you our commission. Danielle Fracassa is our vice chairperson. Danielle. We have Idella Bailey, Maddie Boykin, Karen Davis Harris, Santhia Gwynn, Angela Mitchell and Brenda Mosley are not here this evening. Michelle Perry as well. Retha Richmond, Joyce Schulman, Deborah Williamson, and Carolyn Burns is our council member. And we'd like to thank them for all the wonderful work that they've done on the commission this year. Our speaker, he is a gardener, he is a garden designer, He is active in various garden circles. He is an enthusiast of plant history, plant design, and the future impact of plants on people and people on plants. The amazing story of how a small garden club and a dedicated group of individuals have worked together to bring the world's most famous contemporary garden designer to Michigan. This is an exciting and wonderful new thing on Belle Isle, the Oudolf Garden Detroit. I'd like to present to you this evening our speaker, Mr. Richard P. Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. Lonnie told me that there would be a number of people who were receiving awards this evening, and I identify so strongly with all that goes into working from the wintertime with all the plans and looking at magazines and coming up with dreams and ideals and trying to figure out what can I do that will make this problem go away, or how will I make that more beautiful, or how can I repeat what I loved so much the year before. And so many choruses to that song that repeats in all of your lives and through all of this city. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for letting me speak today, and also for the invitation. Lonnie and I met because I did a presentation similar to this one for a conservation group. And what is so wonderful about what you're doing on a home scale is also happening, as our friend was just telling us, citywide and across all of Southeast Michigan. There are some incredible things going on. And I think, Benny, am I on? All right, you can hear me all right if I step away from the mic. How I got involved in the Oudolf Garden Detroit. In fact, maybe that's a good thing to say. People always want to know, and we went through the same thing. How do you say that? Oudolf is Dutch. Oudolf is German. If you say Oudolf or Oudolf, Pete will not correct you. And it's Piet Oudolf, not Piet. It's P-I-E-T. It's the Dutch derivative of Peter, right? But he says Pete. Anyway, 4 years ago, this little garden club that I belonged to, about 100 members, wanted to do something in a way that would have an impact on a lot of people. Something that they could do for, something we could do that would brighten the lives of people, that would improve conditions for pollinators that were failing. We were reading about monarch butterflies, I'm sure you know, and other kinds, and bees. Their numbers are plummeting and we're losing so many. What's going on? Lots of worry, lots of concern, which is prompting a lot of study and some, what looks like some comeback. So in an attempt to do something, this was a club that had been started 125 years ago and had been around for a long time. It was started by the wives of some of the captains of industry in Detroit, and was at one time, had members all over the state, but now pretty much down in here in Southeast Michigan. I'm the only male member of that club in all of its history, which is really kind of interesting. But it's a wonderful thing to be a part of, and it was one of the 10 founding clubs of the Garden Club of America, which occasionally you will see on the news because they do a great deal on the national level to promote conservation and preservation of everything from wetlands to forestry and proper procedures for reestablishing the kinds of things that we need in nature to keep our lives healthy. So anyway, doing our part in this planning and trying to come up with an idea, we wanted to pick a place first, and we thought, why not Belle Isle? So many people have such fond memories of Belle Isle, going to picnics there or family reunions, going to do all kinds of things, visiting when there used to be a part of the zoo there, lots and lots and lots of things. Everybody remembers a little bit of Belle Isle if you had anything to do with this area at all. So we thought maybe we'll try to do something on Belle Isle. And one of our members, we wanted everybody to give names, and one of our members said, I really, really like this guy's work that I saw in New York City. She had a daughter that lived there, and I didn't know who Pete Oudolf was. And then I began to see the articles of his work, so I'll do a little introduction of who that is. This is who I'm talking about. It's important to talk about this guy because of the impact that he has had around the world, beautifying things on such a scale. What you're doing for your house and for your lot and for your block, this is a fellow who's able to do it around the world. And we took a look at that and thought, why not? So myself, Maura Campbell, and Gene Hudson wrote a letter to Pete Oudolf and asked him, we started it out saying, this is a love letter from Detroit. And you know, that love letter turned into a romance. He has become one of Detroit's biggest emissaries around the world. He came to Detroit, it was wintertime. I'll show you a little picture of us in scarves and gloves and everything else when he was here. He came to Detroit and he fell in love with Detroit. I have a theory why that is. But who knew what would happen? Now, Pete's work, here we are, in the golf cart on the DeQuinder Cut. How many of you have been there? Have you had a chance to do that? And the river walk? And isn't that beautiful? Isn't that wonderful what's happening? And now to know they're going to do that all the way down to the train station too, where Ford is taking over that building and doing some wonderful things there. Well, I think what happened is because if you have, keep your eyes and ears open, there'll be more showings, and maybe your library will show it as well. But around the country, libraries are one place, garden clubs are doing it also. But there was a fellow by the name of Tom Piper, who is a documentary filmmaker, and he did a documentary on the life and the work of Pete Oudolf. Pete Oudolf started a little nursery with his wife in a corner of the Netherlands. And he had an interest in getting away from the kind of gardening that was so intensive, like an estate gardener might require dozens of people to keep all those hedges and topiary and shrubs in condition and changing things out every season if there are lots of areas for just bedding plants or whatever. You know how it is when you're just trying to keep up with your pots on your front porch. Now imagine, you know, when you have acres of things like that. He was trying to get away from that, and it was a part of the movement toward the need for better conservation practices in gardening. So he started taking black-eyed Susan, and he would work with that plant until he found ones that were less prone to disease, ones that had stronger stems, and he would keep breeding those together and until he got one that would finish its bloom in the fall and still have a beautiful black cone that looked good and stood steady in the wind and the snow. So it looked good against the snow, that black against the white, or the black against maybe a blonde grass that he was also working on, that also had a presence or a nice texture for the winter. So he was working with colors in all the seasons, textures in all the seasons, and how things looked good, as well as how they exist well together. So, you know, who do we have in our communities? It doesn't matter who it is or where they came from if they can get along, right? And if everybody can bloom where they're planted and we don't have anyone who's trying to take over everyone else. Those are the ones you want out of your garden, right? You can't keep up with those guys, right? So Pete's working on that level, and this documentary, back then to Tom Piper, this film documentary is called 5 Seasons. If you see it anywhere, if you get a chance and you see that title, do what you can to watch it. because it will reveal a lot about why this man has become famous around the world. And he and some other people in Belgium, as well as the Netherlands and in the UK, have started to revolutionize the way landscaping is planned. So it's not just a group of perennials, or maybe a few groups of perennials, but something that looks like nature has built over hundreds of thousands of years. You know, when you drive around that mountain and you see this valley in the springtime and it's all in bloom and it takes your breath away, that's the feeling they're trying to go after. And also to do it in such a way, because his gardens, many of them, like the Highline in New York, which is built on the top of an old railroad that runs down the west side of Manhattan, or Laurie Garden, which is the top of a parking structure in Millennium Park in Chicago. They're not even in the ground, but when you're in them, it takes you into a different place. It takes you into a place that feels like so natural. And it's planted initially. It's controlled to keep the members that go overboard and try to take over everything else, but they only cut it down once a year, and they leave it in place. So it's a garden for 5 seasons, but it takes so much less. These are plants that don't require fertilizer. These are plants that don't require endless pruning and cutting and deadheading and so on. So there's so much less energy put into a product that is in imitation of nature. It isn't actually natural because, again, those plants were all selected over time to make that presence really stand out in that little plant community that he creates. Here he is in his office. And I've talked about a lot of these points already, so you are aware. And he's won so many awards all over the world. In fact, I'm going next week to see one of his gardens in Tokyo. And he has a following. He has maybe 55,000 people that follow him on Instagram. And lots of other, on social media, lots of other things that he does. Is again another little piece of his office and some of the work that he has done for these places. This is his own garden in Hummelo. Hummelo means little bee. He's written a lot of books with a lot of other famous plants people. If you know the names of some of these plants people, you'll recognize Noel Kingsbury and some of the others. But if you want to get a taste of this new style of gardening, take a look at these books, and all you have to do is Google Oudolf, and you'll get that through Amazon or whatever. Now, you're all gardeners, right? You too? All of you as well? So, a long time ago, Gertrude Jekyll, the English gardener, taught us how to plant in wide swaths to get a great effect of color. So you could plant in the spring, you could plant white tulips against purple tulips and a swath of yellow daffodils or whatever. You would try to achieve the colors that you like. She had a certain thing that she was trying to achieve, but she taught us about block planting rather than cottage-style gardening, which is any plant anywhere. There's room for it. There's a whole history about cottage gardening, and it is a wonderful style of gardening, and it has its place and it has its own beauty. But Gertrude Jekyll moved it out of that into block planting, which is one of the styles that Pete incorporates, one of the things that Pete incorporates into his work. And I'll tell you this so that when you see the garden that's going to be planted on Belle Isle, you'll have some idea of what you're looking at. It'll make a little more sense to you outside of the sheer beauty of it. So block planting means maybe 100 plants of one type, and then next to it another type, maybe 50. Then maybe there are something very big like, do you know what wild indigo is, or baptisia, or rattlesnake plant? One of our native plants gets about this tall with bluish green leaves, has blue flowers that look like lupine in the spring. So maybe that, because it's so big, there'll just be a group of 3 of them inside of another block. So block planting is a mass of one type of perennial. Now what Pete did was introduce matrix planting into block planting. So this is what you see in nature. It looks like a grass or a sedge through the whole field, and then you have these blocks of colors where it looks like plants have grown naturally in drifts of color, and they bloom and they provide texture and other kinds of color, whether it's with their leaf color or their bloom, all through the whole year. And these are his drawings. The circles or the organic shapes are the types of plants, and all the little tiny pointillistic dots that you see, that stands for the matrix, which is a type of grass. He loves Midwestern plants. Some of his favorite plants are natives to this area. And in fact, take a look at his drawings there. Don't you think that any of those would make a nice scarf? Or necktie? Socks? Yes, for sure. Handbags, all kinds of things. Well, stay tuned because we're working on that too. And we hope at some point to have a collection of his drawings that will open at the same time at the DIA that his garden opens on Belle Isle. We're already working with the DIA on that. Here we go. I'm going to jump back and forth through different kinds of topics, but after Pete said yes, the Garden Club of Michigan picked up the tab for his design. It was about $150,000 to get him back and forth to see the place and to get him to set aside some time because he does his drawing in the winter. And he picked a place when he was here on Belle Isle. We showed him all the riverfront, we showed him some other sites, but when you have a great artist, you don't say, I want you to paint something that matches my couch. You don't even say you want them to paint. If they want to sculpt, if they want to sing, whatever they want to do, that's what you pay for, right? You give them their head because that's how you get real art. And an art is, in this way, something that everyone can participate in. And there are all kinds of ways to do that. So Pete made this design. This is the second design that he made for us. The first design was more circular. But when he was on the site that he picked, we were going on the way back to the airport, and he said, I want to stop by Belle Isle one more time. And we went all the way down around Sunset Point, came up by the Dawson Marine Museum, and he wanted to turn to go, the conservatory, the glass house, was on the left, and he said, stop. So we stopped, and he got out, and he raised his hands, and he said right there, this is the place. And it was that empty field right in front of the Nancy Brown Peace Carillon that he chose. Well, when he was back later on and walking through, he discovered, and we had other experts give us the topography of the land, over time, that land had produced little swales, not high, but little swales where water drained and soil had settled. Probably most of that soil came out of that lake that's right there on the other side of the bell tower. So I'm going to try to use this mouse that Benny has provided for me here. Benny, what's the magic word? Doesn't want to do that. I'm going back. There we go. I'll have to point it out. There is a structure in the middle lower part. You're looking from a drone down on top of the Peace Carillon. That's a bell tower. You see the shadow that heads off from that toward a green kind of looks like an upside down U or something, and then all the colored splotches are beds that are behind it. Anyway, that was all blank, that was all bare. It was only ever used once a year for the Grand Prix, which had their main grandstand there. And in the one corner up on the top right, they had dumped tons and tons and tons of limestone gravel because the soil was a little bit wet from time to time and they had to stabilize it in order to make it safe to put their grandstand on there. Anyway, in spite of that, that soil there's a lake on the bottom. That's what that dark area is on this side of the building. And probably many, many years ago when Belle Isle was under construction and they were making waterways for kayaking and skating in the winter and so on, that soil probably came to make that lake. So it's all good soil, very clay-like, but anyway, it had settled and made this sort of wavy pattern in its topography. And that's why he chose those rib-like or finger-like designs, kind of organically working around the hills and the valleys in that. So that's where that came from. And he went to all the trouble. Pete is extremely precise. When he gives you a plot of land in an organic shape, he will tell you exactly how many plants of that variety you need to fill it to the degree that it will grow perfectly well, to the point where it keeps out weeds. So there's not as much weeding to do. And his on-center for each plant is different than what you find with most growers because of that. But it's because of his years and years as a nurseryman and a skilled person. These, again, the beautiful designs, I can probably blow this up a little bit for you to see, but you can begin to see again the block and the matrix plantings. The beds in all those shapes are labeled A, B, C, D, E, or F. And each letter has its own list of plants, combinations that he knows will look beautiful through the whole seasons and in combination with each other. So B is another set of plants that looks good with A. C the same way. Now, in A, B, and C may all be prairie dropseed, grass, which is the case for us. That's the matrix for all of the garden, which is one of our native grasses. One of my favorites, by the way, because in July, it smells like cardamom and honey. When you're in a big bunch of it and you're walking through, it just stops me every time. It's so fragrant. The butterflies love it too. And he went to all this trouble. He did his design work, got everything set for us, and this is going to Benny, I'm having a little trouble. Are you around? On the lower one? Thank you. That's all I needed. It's so nice to have a Benny around, isn't it? And so you can see, again, the different combinations. And I just wanted you to see how complex it is. When you are actually walking through one of his gardens, if you get a chance and you're in New York City and you can walk the High Line, or if you're in Chicago and you go to Millennium Park and you're in the Laurie Park, which was the first garden he did in the US, it doesn't look complicated. It looks beautiful and simple. And it reads simply. So it's it's like when you hear beautiful music, there may be incredible note working going on for all the musicians that work on it, but it sounds gorgeous and simple to your ear. We'll pass through some of these. Some of the beautiful plants that he uses. This is his own garden at Hummelo, and this is just about this time of year, maybe a week or so. The Netherlands is very much on the same cycle of seasons as we are. And so that's probably another reason he likes our plants so well, because wherever you go around the world, in that band, whether it's altitude or whether it's longitude, you can find plants that will grow. Like, how many of you have plants that are from Japan in your yard, or China? Do you know the origins of your plants? Well, you can find that out, and that's a great study. It's one of my great passions, is to know plants and where they come from. Here's another one of his gardens. What a gorgeous walk. that is. And this is very much what ours will look like when you see it. This is a picture of the High Line, which used to be a way that animals were carried to the slaughter in Manhattan. And it finally closed down in the 60s, and it was not planted for, nobody drove a train on it for decades. People started going up to have picnics on it, climbing up. Kids and stuff would climb up to have picnics up there because nature was throwing tree seeds and other kinds of things up there that were starting to grow, claiming it back, as it were. And a couple of guys had this idea, hey, we could make a really beautiful garden out of this. And so they did, and there's this whole huge organization. This has become one of the most popular gardens in the world. Pete did all the designs for the plants in that garden. This is Laurie Garden, and Laurie is famous. You see that purple in the first slide on your left? It's called a river of blue, and it's sage that blooms about 3 months through the summer. Different sages that bloom, all, again, native plants. This is one of his gardens in England. I love these little bubbles of grass, which also have an ancient history, because in medieval times, European garden designers would have either walkways that they would build, or they would have towers of turf that you could stand up and look down onto the design. They loved to make designs out of shrubbery and colored glass and gravel and so on that reminded them of carpets and knot tying and that kind of thing. And you needed a vantage point because they didn't have drones. You needed a vantage point to be able to see down on them. And that was a modern interpretation. All these little green dots in that whole list are places where Pete has done gardens. Here's our own Belle Isle, and you get a better idea. You see the green arrow that says garden site, where it is. You recognize MacArthur Bridge. You see where the Scott Fountain is on the lower end there in Sunset Point. And so that's the part of the garden, or the part of the Belle Isle where it is. All of that brown area, we were able to secure permission from Michigan Department of Natural Resources in order to build the garden. And we were able to do that because the governor and the head of DNR saw the potential for a garden of this magnitude here in Michigan and on Belle Isle. And that's how that has worked out. That's the Nancy Brown Peace Carillon that I was talking about. There's a wonderful history story. Look it up if you don't know it. I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to keep going. I wanted to tell you too that other neat thing about this garden is that of the 12 growers that we have, only 2 of them are not in Michigan. 18,000 plants will be planted in the first planting. We had hoped to do that this fall. Something happened. I'll tell you more about that. I don't have time to go through all of the plants for you, so you'll just have to read quickly and see some of these things you'll know, some of these things you may have in your garden or kinds like them. And so you'll know when you go through. You can find these lists on our website, Oudolf Garden Detroit, and you can find out more history about the garden. So we had the design, we're working on the construction, and then in perpetuity will be the continuous planting, because nothing lives forever. Things have to be replaced. It will cost us about $2 million to build the garden, and we are required by DNR, but it makes so much good sense to us and the other agencies in the state to put just as much money away so that it never becomes a burden on the taxpayers to take care of this. So we raised $4.2 million in 12 months with the generous donations from all the major foundations in this area and lots of wonderful individuals who again saw the potential for what this garden will do. Laurie Garden brings about 10 million visitors a year that come just to see that garden. The High Line the same way. And what we've seen around the world is that wherever Pete builds a garden, people come from all over the world to see it. It becomes a destination. So what we're excited about is that when you are bringing in that many ambitious gardeners, it raises the tide for all of us, because all these kinds of plants that become available that we may not have had before or known about before, our knowledge becomes better, our availability becomes better, and of course there is an economic impact as well, which we hope will continue to help the restoration of all the great historic buildings and facilities on Belle Isle. So we were going to plant this fall, and then guess what happened? We were so proud of our efforts because we raised all this money in a year. And then Mother Nature gave us a major tap on the shoulder. And there was this huge flood, about 2 weeks after groundbreaking. Record levels. Lake Superior was so full, and all that water was coming downstream, and all the Great Lakes are high. And they're telling us it's going to be higher next year. So we had that design that I showed you, and now look at the Peace Carillon. You can't see the moat because it's all underwater. The lake is everywhere. You see the channel on the left, the international waterway, but it was so full. So this was just a page I cut. We're going to go by this very quickly, telling people on our website we're not doing the planting this fall because we could not construct. Look at how far the water came up into where our design was. So we were reeling over what this meant. You know, the simplest thing is to build the ground up, right? And get it out of the water. Just raise it up. Raise the level of the ground. But you can't, in this state, and it makes sense, you can't just put dirt down to make your plot of land higher and drier, because that sends the problem downstream. And that's not fair. If you raise your plot up, you have to dig it deeper somewhere else so that the same amount of water is caught and you're not sending the problem downstream. This problem has made the whole project so much better than what we had thought about before in our haste. Because, and this is how that would have been affected, again, the brown area. What we ended up doing was shortening the beds, working with Pete all through this summer, moving everything closer to the road, raising the whole thing up about 3.5 feet. And where you see the Nancy Brown Carillon as that square area down in the middle in the lower part. But all of that other area that has the dark lines around it, that will be excavated. And the lake will become larger and we'll end up making wetland habitat. So all of the people who were a little cross with us because we weren't using enough native only plants now are thrilled because these will all be native species in that area. And it also recreates more of what the island was probably like when it was not messed around with, made possible for us to have our recreational facilities and that sort of thing. So the catastrophe became an opportunity. And actually, the costs that we'll save by lessening the beds help give us the money to raise them up and do the other things that we need to do to make this garden high and dry. Pete is redesigning the plants in how they fit into these beds as well. And and there's more than just this new habitat area. We'll have the only garden in the world that Pete has designed rain gardens for. And he's also designed, can you see over on the left what's blue? That's a special rain garden, very much like what you were talking about over in the 9 Mile area, as catchment area to hold water and keep it from wreaking havoc in the storm sewer systems. So that's what that is. We're catching water from all that part of Belle Isle and putting it into that rain garden as well. And that's the other part of it. Lots of people want to know how to get involved. You can go online and sign up as a volunteer. You can go online and adopt a plant. If you like, there are still some plants that haven't been adopted, that haven't been paid for. You can go online and you can adopt a plant. There are lots of ways you can give outright. Garden clubs have done it, all kinds from all over the country. And in fact, we had to call some Korean friends because when they heard we were planting in the fall, they called me and said, we already have our tickets. We're coming to plant. We'll come to help you plant. And the same people from Eastern Europe, everywhere, whenever Pete's gardens are planted, people come from all over the world to help with that because they're so interested in what's going on. So that's a little bit about what's going on Belle Isle and how things have changed, and it's been a whirlwind of a ride. We've truly been building this airplane as we coast down the runway, but it's going to work. We're going to get there. It's drying out now, so we're going to get some of the building done that we need to raise that up so that we can continue working on it next spring and summer and then be planting. We may not be able to open in fall of 2020 like we had hoped to, but we think that for sure it'll be the spring of the next year. And that's my talk about Belle Isle and the Oudolf Garden on Belle Isle, Lonnie. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your patience, your listening.
Thank you very much, Richard. Very
Sure.
fascinating. We need one of these in Oak Park.
Yes.
I'm not sure we can afford the price tag, but we'll find a place. Before we hand out the awards, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the people who are really responsible for putting this together. First and foremost, Tiffany Brown from the Public Works Department. She comes to all the beautification meetings. She puts together all the information, the program, and really makes it happen. All the certificates. This week is an extremely busy week for her, and she makes it all happen. So I really want to thank her a tremendous amount for what she does for the program. And with her are Ray Krajewski and Scott Lamar from the Public Works Department. So in my opinion, maybe a little partial, but the best department that we have here in the city. Of course, I have to thank Benny White and Colton Dale. They are working on the PowerPoint, taking all the pictures, putting everything together for the presentation. And Benny's joined in there with Kenny Applewhite, who always helps us out with all of our audio video type of needs. So thank you very much. Now it's time to give out the awards. So I'd like to welcome up our Mayor Marian McClellan.
Thank you so much, Assistant City Manager Kevin Yee. Richard Thomas's presentation reminded me of a T-shirt I was given with a Chinese symbol on it, and the symbol for crisis also means the symbol for opportunity. So it seemed to be apropos what happened to your garden. A little bit about what's happening in Oak Park. A sneak preview for you, in addition to what Assistant City Manager Yee told you about the 9 Mile Road project. There's a bunch going on. So we've been waiting with bated breath for something to happen at Lincoln Center. And I understand that Kroger has finally signed the deed to the property, which means that, yeah, glory be. That we will stop driving by a closed building, and we'll start to see some action over there this month is what we're expecting. What I learned about economic development is that if somebody tells you it's going to happen in June, you think, which June? Because it's not anyone's fault. It's just things get delayed normally. So the 9 Mile Road redesign is very exciting. You must drive down there. we narrow the roads to slow the traffic. We don't want to have the Indianapolis 500 between Ferndale and Southfield going through the middle of Oak Park. We want to develop that area as a new blooming retail area. And by beautifying it and adding parks to it, we will start to attract the kind of retail that we've been hoping for, that we leave the city of Oak Park to shop at. So this will be, I think, a tremendous change for the better for the city of Oak Park, and we're here to see it and enjoy it. I'm looking forward to the year when the park on the south side is worked on and the landscaping will be added, and then you'll really start to be proud of that area again. The WWJ building, that was another one that was promised a few years ago, and then the flood happened and environmental contamination happened to the site of the old WWJ building with big tower on 8 Mile near Myers. And so that was delayed. And we just got a $600,000 grant to remediate that environmental issue. And so that will start to perk along, and eventually we will be able to come and celebrate fun events at a destination restaurant on 8 Mile Road. Something new for the city of Oak Park. I'm so pleased. There's going to 11 Mile is also getting some work. We cooperated with the city of Berkeley and the city of Huntington Woods because we share that 11 Mile strip between Woodward and Greenfield, and we went together on the planning, and we're looking at another road diet and bioswales and improving the area, the look of the area. So we started by rezoning that area from just industrial to mixed use. There's a 3-block stretch on 11 Mile that has parking behind it, which is perfect for retail or restaurants. And a brewery has shown interest in one of the buildings, and another restaurant with outdoor dining. So it's not your daddy's Oak Parks. Down also near 8 Mile Road, Coolidge Place is starting to build. It is mid and low-income housing, which is pretty much all of us in Oak Park, when you think about it. But it will be new and beautifully landscaped. It will have a play area for children and a community center, and it will add needed housing to the city of Oak Park. Michigan Municipal League had all the mayors come in and told us a couple of years ago that Traverse City is having problems because it's booming in Traverse City. Restaurants would open, and they couldn't get people to work at the restaurants who could afford to live nearby. So the restaurant closed not because it didn't have customers, but because it didn't have anybody to work there. So there is a huge need for affordable housing for people who are working and would love to live close enough to their job to make it worth getting there. So we are, I think, at the forefront of building 2 places. Jefferson Oaks is the other one. Beautiful, beautiful building. My son, who lives in Huntington Woods, says the fronts of those buildings look like the neighbor across the street in this upscale house, fancy schmancy, beautifully fronted and an elegant looking addition to our city. Let's see, 10 Mile, we're adding islands to make it safer to cross for pedestrians. The ACDC, Arts and Cultural Diversity Commission, is looking at having art added to the planters that are out and around to make them look a little better. What you're doing, each one of you is doing, is probably the most important thing that the city or anyone else is doing. It's taking so much pride in your own property and putting your heart and soul and God knows how many hours it takes through the winter, through the spring, summer, and fall to keep a property up to the level that you have, because these lovely people are extremely picky, and some beautiful, some beautiful places were not chosen. And we'd like to thank them also, because they're adding curb appeal. You are adding curb appeal to your home. You're raising your neighbor's property values. Probably your neighbor is looking at you and saying, boy, that looks nice, maybe I'll put a couple bushes in too, or can I have what you're throwing away out of your garden and I'll plant it? Or you're probably saying, here, I'm dividing this, right? Why don't you take some of this, because it's, $18 at the garden store, and here it is for nothing. What you're doing is making the biggest difference in the city of Oak Park. It's making everybody proud to go down the street. It's inspiring other people, and we just want to thank you for all of the work that you're doing. Let's see. First, I was wondering, is anybody a first-time winner? A first-time winner, first year? All right, all right. Welcome to the neighborhood. Is anybody here for the second time? Third? Anybody here up to fifth time? 10th? Anybody more than 10th? Oh, my goodness. We got to get them on the commission, yeah. Right. Okay. Again, thank you for what you do. We're trying to do our part, and you're trying to do your part, and it's a wonderful partnership that we have. Now we would like to present you with your awards. So, what do we have them coming up here and around? Which way?
Come up through the middle and around.
Come up the middle aisle and around, and
So we
we'll
take some pictures. So,
get the pictures. Where do you want the pictures?
right there's fine.
Say it again. Okay. Ellen and Carrie Edelman.
Here you are, TV. So
Oh,
you have to speak into the mic.
Gotta speak into the mic.
So I'll move the mic over.
let's try and do this again. Ellen and Carrie Edelman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, good point. Joyce and Jerry Bone. Oh, a Mumford Mustang. All right. Go maroon and blue. Wayne and Sandra Breckenridge. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. I married them. All my marriages come with a guarantee, guaranteed to be happy, right? Oh, wait a minute. Arnold and Louise, is it Camperi? Robert and Patricia Check.
Thank you very much.
Neil Jeffrey Dilworth Sr. Vincent and Sharon Dobson. Kevin and Rolanda Dunlap. Jeanette and Milton Kendrick. Carolyn Leonard. Brian Miller. Say it again. Oh, and company. Leon and Mary Mitchell. They must have a collection of signs. They could wallpaper their room. Our Mother of Perpetual Help Parish, care of Leonora Richardson and Cora Link. Wow, that's a big job. Bernard and Alyssa Robertson. Ms. Patricia Simpson. Barbara Tract. Okay, waiting for certificates for these. Tyrone and Danielle Jackson. Deloise Wynn. I'd like to call Chairperson Lonnie Tabb-Upshaw up for closing remarks. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for qualifying, and keep on gardening.
Once again, we'd like to thank you all for coming out. And we just enjoy coming out, touring the city and looking at all the beautiful homes. And it really is an easy job for us to select homes because the criteria sometimes might be kind of high. And I'm sure people are not always happy when they don't receive an award, and they've been receiving them for many years. But we don't give up. Just continue to help us to move our city forward. And I'd like to thank the commissioners for all your hard work. And we look forward to coming out again next year. And we'd like to remind you of our flower exchange that's coming up soon. Next year, this time it's going to be on a Sunday. So listen out and look out for the date. And Richard, thank you so much for being our guest speaker. This concludes our ceremony for this evening.